Happy Pride, everyone, and welcome back to the Legacy of Love podcast. This episode is a special one. How could a podcast called The Legacy of Love not speak directly to a community that's so often underserved and still fighting for basic rights? Love is really love. And that's why I invited today's guest, Rebecca Secord, to join me. Becca is an estate planning attorney at Fonte Law based in San Francisco, California. And she's not only brilliant at what she does, she's also a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community. In this episode, we talk about how estate planning can support queer families, whether it's protecting your rights as a parent, planning around property and partnership, or making sure your healthcare wishes are honored. It's a conversation filled with practical advice, heart, and of course, pride. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Rebecca Secord, welcome to the Legacy of Love podcast. I'm so happy you're here with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. I love this topic. We were just talking about off air. This is the first time I've really come into a conversation of like having a clear focus and agenda. So I don't know, the style will be hopefully really helpful and useful for people. And maybe I'll be a little bit more focused than I normally am. But with that said, I still want to start off with hearing about you and your journey into estate planning. What originally brought you to this work? I'm sure there's a story. There always is.
There's always the story. There's always a story. And it's fun because as estate planning attorneys, we get to be storytellers, right? We help our
Yeah.
clients tell their story. And how I got into estate planning is sort of an accident from an accident. So prior to this life, and still in this life, I'm a real estate attorney. So my primary focus has been on residential real estate. And I'm licensed in California, Virginia, and DC. And I practiced for almost 10 years in Virginia before moving to California. And it's a very, very, very different experience in Virginia versus California. The laws are very different. Real estate is handled very differently. And then I moved here and I was working in an escrow company because I didn't take the bar exam right away. And let's just say my first day on the job, I was like, oh, this is going to be very, very different than what I was expecting. In Virginia on the East Coast and most of the East Coast, attorneys are involved when people are buying and selling real estate, right?
Oh, really?
California, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're either, buyers and sellers have their own attorneys and are represented by attorneys during the transaction in addition to their real estate agents, or there's an attorney that's working in California, the equivalent of what you would be expecting as an escrow in escrow. So an attorney would be holding escrow and sit at a table with both parties and facilitate the actual closing. It's very different here where you're working with a real estate agent. The only time you're ever going to talk to an attorney is if there's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And almost nobody is giving you consultation about the legal implications about owning real estate, whether they apply to you as an individual, you're buying it with somebody else that's not your spouse, or with your spouse. So I say all that to say that's sort of how estate planning also happened. I've been doing estate planning because when you own real estate, the next thing that you have to do is make sure that your estate plan is in place. Because especially in California, owning real estate is a fast track, one-way ticket, do not go directly to jail, right? To
Probate.
probate. And it's
Yeah.
very, very expensive,
Yeah.
right? The average home in California is over $1 million. And when you talk about our metro areas, San Francisco, LA, Orange County, San Diego, you're pushing over $1 million.
Yeah.
It's just really sad that people spend so much time and effort growing wealth to buy real estate to not do that next step, which is to protect it and keep the money with the
Mm.
family, right?
I love that you said it that way. I've never heard anyone say it quite the way that you just did. Usually, what I just say is like, yeah, well, most people need to set up a trust. If you own a house in California, because you're going to be over that threshold, right?
Right.
And you want to avoid that. But the way that you said it made, I don't know, so much more sense, or it hit me different.
And estate planning isn't just for people with real estate. What we're going to talk about today is, estate planning for the LGBTQ community. Not everybody owns real estate. Not everybody's married. Not everybody has kids. But you know what? Everybody needs estate planning.
Everyone does.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Every single person does. And whether it's a trust plan or a will plan, and we can talk about the difference, but Everybody needs it. It doesn't matter if you have real estate. It doesn't matter if you have kids. It doesn't matter if your kids are grown. If you're a living human being, you have to have an estate plan. Everybody's going to die, right? We're all going to die someday. We can't do much when we're dead because we're dead. We can plan for it. We can make sure that the people that we love get the things that we want them to have. We can protect them. But the really, really important part is what happens when I'm still alive and I can't do the things that I can do normally, right? So there's some incapacity issues. If you don't have a plan, California will make one for you, and you have zero control over how that's handled because you don't have capacity. So that's where estate planning can pick up, and where we say estate planning is for everybody, it is for everybody.
It really is.
The second you turn 18, right?
Yeah.
The second you turn 18, you've got kids that are graduating high school this year. They need a little baby plan, right? At a minimum, an advanced healthcare directive and a power of attorney, because they're going to be full-grown adults now, right? Even you might be paying their tuition and you're paying the room and board to go to college, do whatever, but they get into a problem at school and you don't have any authority to do anything as a parent. So sort of a little windy road about how I got to estate planning, but it's because estate planning and real estate are so closely related that I can't have a conversation with anybody about real estate without also talking about estate planning, because they go hand in hand, and making sure that, what you've worked so hard for is actually protected.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have you back on and focus on just that piece, like real estate, because in all honesty, it's actually my least favorite area with this work, but it's so much of what people really start the journey off. I would say the trigger events, either buying a house or having a baby. And that's usually when
Right.
people know, like, oh shit, I need to get my affairs in order and set up an estate plan. But real estate, I think where for me as a professional, it's like there can be so much with the family house, right? So much memory and,
Mm-hmm.
after death or during incapacity, if the primary residence is like, the main asset and it's illiquid, then we
Mm-hmm.
have to look at selling it, which can be really hard conversations. So there's just a lot of emotion there. But again, I know that that's very much where I think most people are starting on this journey. So
Yeah.
thank you for, bringing that to light. And I did not know that about, Virginia. I mean, why would I? I don't practice in Virginia.
We can have a whole conversation about the difference between east of the Mississippi and west of the Mississippi when it comes to
Yeah.
handling real estate, because when I came out here, I didn't realize that it was done differently than how I, learned it in law school and practiced it on the East Coast. And then I get out here and I was like, why is it different? So I did the research. So we can have a conversation about that another time. Because honestly, like, real estate was a total accident for me. I cried. I cried through property law in law school. And that was my very first class. And I remember calling my dad. I'm like, I got my first reading assignment. I'm reading it. And I call him crying. And I was like, I don't understand the word. This is all in English, but I don't get it. And he goes, like, you better, in more colorful language, you better figure it out. Right. It was not my fun class. But then I realized, because I graduated law school during the recession in '09, and there were not a lot of jobs available. And I ended up doing some litigation support. And a friend of mine asked me to come support her in a law firm in Virginia to help with real estate closings. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. Don't even know what it is. Don't care. Get me out of this windowless room. And then I started working it, and I was like, oh, I love this. Love it. I love the puzzle. I love the people. I love the problems. And then it all rolled into estate planning. And it's so much fun.
Wow. Wow. And the
Yeah.
rest is history, right?
The rest is history. Yeah. And then you want to fold in the, how do we make this gay? Just say less. Say less. How do we make this gay? We can make it way gay. I'm out. I've been out. I'm a very gay attorney, and I am very loud about it. And one of the things that, as an attorney, I've worked on is making sure that folks in our community are protected, especially, and I don't want to suit politics, but it's the reality of what we're dealing with right now, which
Yeah.
is, how do we protect our LGBTQ community from preserving their families, like
Right.
the established families that they have, right? Whether they've been recognized, through a lawful marriage, protecting their kids that they've either, adopted, or however their family has been comprised, and also protecting their chosen family. right? A lot of people in our community don't have like their birth families are not the family. We've developed our own families based out of need and access and all of those support issues that we're looking for. And it's making sure that when we're planning for our folks that are in the LGBTQ community is that it's really not just like everybody else, right? We are super inclusive in our firm. And, we actually didn't talk about where is this coming from? I'm an associate attorney at Fonte Law. We're in San Francisco and we practice estate planning with heart. And we really lead with that. Like it's very heart-centered and heart-focused.
I just love that. Also, just for listeners to know that Patricia DeFonte was on, I think, episode 2 of the show, really helped kick off this podcast. And that's an excellent episode. We'll definitely link to that in the show notes because that's just, so much of why I asked her back and she said, you've got to have Becca come on. So here we are.
That's the make it gay thing. Because really, like, we really stand behind our estate planning with heart. We're very heart forward and want to make sure that the plans that we're crafting and the stories that we're telling for our clients align with who they are.
Yes.
It's not just the legal stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all the legal stuff, but it's not just that, because inside of our estate plans, we're able to let's talk about the good stuff first. We'll talk about the ugly stuff later. But the good stuff is like, you get to tell the story about, if you have children, we do really robust guardianship planning for our LGBT, for all of our clients, but you have the opportunity to really tell your story on, hey, I want you to raise my kids this way. These are the things that we find really important. These are the things that we want them exposed to. And it's basically like, as a new parent, wishing that you had a playbook on all of the things that you would want for your kid. This is what you get to give your guardians on how to raise your children.
Wow.
And for our community, it's making sure that, like, especially if there are people that you need to keep your kids away from,
yes,
you have the ability to say that. Right. Yeah. So, if you're picking guardians, and let's just, we'll use an example. Like, we're here in California and I grew up in the Midwest and I don't want my kid to go back to the Midwest because for a whole lot of reasons, right? I don't want her to go back and be exposed to those very small, closed-minded ideas that I grew up with and was able to get away from, right? It's not a safe environment for her. I wouldn't have wanted that for her either. You have the power to say, this is what I really want for my kids. And I really want you to keep them away from X, Y, and Z for these reasons. And you can be as light or as aggressive as you need to be in identifying safe or unsafe people for your family.
I love that. And so this is kind of accompanying the estate plan, or this is part of the guardianship documents? I know this is kind of embedded in like the will, is that right?
No,
guardianship is like
it's not.
my biggest, like, I don't know a lot about because I'm never a guardian and for my clients, and usually I work with people like later in life. So anyways, I'm honestly asking this just as much as a parent.
Yeah. So the short answer is yes, it's included in a will, right? We don't do it that way though. We say, hi, I'm Becca. I'm unmarried. I have one child. My child is not identified. You'll never see her name on my will, right? She's a minor. You'll never see it. And then when you actually get to the guardian provisions in the will, we say there's a separate document that the court can look at in order to establish guardianship. None of that. Our guardians who are named, our backup guardians who are named, they don't go in the will, because what is the will? It is public. You can go down to your local courthouse, go to the probate office, just find it. All the real estate agents that are listening to this conversation, you know exactly what we're talking about, because that's how a lot of real estate agents who are looking for trust administration properties or probate administration property, that's how they're finding it, right? Same thing. It just exposes a lot of people to predators. Turning it back into, how does this help our LGBTQ community? If you've got family that you don't want in your business, it's one extra layer to keep the keepaways away from your stuff and away from your people. So we do a lot of proactive planning to keep people safe. We're very fortunate that a lot of our clients have great relationships with their family, right? Not everybody has that. So at least as far as guardianship goes, when you have kids, and that's just one layer, right? That's just one layer of all of this. And we're talking like, we really get in your business. We really get in your business because we need to know, like, who are the people, who are the good people, who are the bad people, who are the ones that you trust implicitly, who are the ones that have the problems, right? Because when we're having the conversations about who are going to be your important people, who are going to be the decision makers, who are going to be the guardians of the kids, we need to know who's involved in your life. It's just as important to know who the good people are as the bad people.
So guardianship is a good piece. What, or I guess a main piece, and that to me was like kind of top of mind when it came to planning. What are kind of other pieces where you see like there might be, I don't know, common mistakes made, like maybe not every estate planning attorney is going to know, okay, let's think this through and what's needed to kind of support
Yeah,
LGBTQ communities.
that's a big one. One is like the privacy aspect of guardianship when we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about kids, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
big one. There's a lot of attorneys, and I don't know anybody off the top of my head, but there's a lot of attorneys that will do planning inside, like those types of plannings inside of a will, and it's all public. Okay. What are some other things that people in the community need to be aware of when it comes to kids, especially when there are babies involved? Your name being on a birth certificate may not be enough. Just because you're identified as the
Wow.
other parent or the second parent on that birth certificate may not be enough legally to establish your parentage.
Wow.
So what do you need to do? You need to talk to a family law attorney who specializes in adoption, right? In the community, it's usually a confirmation adoption by the other parent. There's an attorney that we work with who works with people on these types of issues all the time. But that's one of them, is just making, like, confirming your rights as a parent. And that's something like, who would have thought? Who would have thought? We're legally married. We went through all the process. We did all of the things. We crossed all the T's, we dotted all the I's. Both of our names are on this birth certificate. And there's a possibility that you may not be recognized as that child's parent. Court order establishing parentage can be a huge benefit to you and your family. And that's something that, like, when we're talking to our clients, we're asking those questions, because if they haven't done that step, we can make the introduction to say, go figure it out, right? Patricia and I, it's very fun because she introduced this wonderful phrase to me. She's got a PhD in paranoia. Yes,
Yes, which I love.
yes, right. We do. We have PhDs in paranoia. I have a special flavor for real estate. She has a special flavor for everything, right? But, like, our job when we're talking to our clients is to identify what's going on so that we can't help with everything, right? Like, I'm never going to do an adoption. I'm never going to do a divorce. If you ever see me in court, it's a sad day in hell,
Yeah.
right? I used to be a litigator, and it's just not my life anymore. We have a phenomenal network of people that we can connect our people to. So we're asking all those questions because if the kid's not been formally adopted, it might cause problems in the estate plan. We don't want that problem. In other situations, like domestic partnership is a really good one for people who are unmarried.
Mm-hmm.
Domestic partnerships, there's two flavors of that in California. There's your local, right? You can register with the city of San Francisco as a registered domestic partner. And that only affords you very basic rights. And it's usually for insurance purposes only. Registered domestic partners with the state of California afford you the same rights that a married couple, a married heterosexual couple would be afforded, or a married homosexual couple would be afforded. The distinction is huge. We can't do joint planning for registered domestic partners who are only registered in their city. We'd have to do two separate plans because you're not married. You don't get the same benefit. So we're asking those types of questions. We're going to go on some side quests, Sarah. I hope you're
That's
ready.
okay. Let's do it.
But, like, what are some other things that, at least as far as the LGBTQ community goes, we're sort of doing a little pivot. We've been talking about kids, we're going to talk about real estate. Let's talk about healthcare, because that's really, really where it matters,
Yeah.
is especially for our trans community,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, there's a T in LGBTQ, right? Our trans community is under attack,
Yeah.
and being able to have people that like, trust, and that are going to go to bat for you if you need medical care, we help you plan. We have language that we include in our advanced healthcare directives and inside the trust, identifying you as part of the community. We identify your pronouns. We say, we really want our agents to seek medical treatment from doctors who are going to respect me, who are going to treat me, that are in line with who I am, so that you're getting the care that you deserve. We're just very clear about make sure that you're seeking out treatment from providers who are going to treat you with respect.
Should be obvious, but
Right.
unfortunately it's not. I've
Yeah.
actually had a few consultations with a few people that are trans, and it was sad because it was for special needs trust specifically, and the trustee was withholding funds, specific to medical care.
For confirmation.
Yeah. And so it was just really, I mean, this was just like a consultation. It's not a client, but just kind of hearing about that whole scenario where you're like, wow, this is really about someone's like life and well-being. And to me, in my mind, a special needs trust, I mean, that's the whole purpose of it, is to be supporting this person. And
Yeah.
if you have a trustee that's withholding funds to do that, just that very thing, I mean, that's such a disservice. So
Right.
that is where, this work, I try to not make it political by any stretch, but it does become that, what do we stand for?
Right. And it's hard not to make it political, right? It's hard not to draw that line and say, well, we're not going to make this about politics. As far as our community is concerned, it's all about politics,
Yeah.
right? Like everything about the LGBTQ community, not everything, but a vast majority of the issues that we face relate back to politics and whether or not we're going to be afforded the same rights that everybody else is getting, right? And I just want to say, you're going to make me a better attorney. You're going to make me a better attorney by what you just told me.
Oh,
A trustee withholding funds for medical care, for gender affirming care, like that should be in trust language. That, especially when you're dealing with the way that we deal with the trust, back on planning, we have in our trust, when we're dealing with distributions to the children or distributions to the beneficiaries, there's some guidelines in there, that things that we consider advancements, but I hadn't considered making sure that there's explicit language in there about medical payments for gender affirming care, either generally or under the advancement section, where it allows the trustee, to make advancements if a beneficiary is requesting it for that purpose. That's fantastic.
I'm glad to help. Hopefully that helps like the future future
Yeah.
beneficiaries too. Is that piece, and also with family planning and wanting to have a family,
Right.
and that the trustee was withholding funds for that purpose as well. So it was just on multiple fronts, it was just heartbreaking to hear.
That's very
you
frustrating.
know and I've
Yeah.
also had consults with parents where they have like their children is trans, and just wanting to make sure that the trustee is like okay and on board with this. But again, it's just like, again, that next level where you really need to be looking for professionals that are going to be supportive. The whole team is working together and working with this person, and again, it's like you have to go that extra step.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because, we're speaking about, to the community, but this also is the message to the parents of gay kids,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yeah.
when you're thinking about your planning, like you and your spouse, fine, but like if you have gay kids, like planning to protect them, right? And that's a really good way to describe like why we care so much about the other people in your life. Because when you're telling me, okay, well, my brother John's fantastic with money, like he's going to be a great steward of our finances,
Mm-hmm.
but he's also an absolute bigot,
Yeah.
right? And he's not going to treat your trans child or your non-binary child with the respect that you have. He's great with the money, but he's going to hold the purse strings. And if your kid needs support in order to, gender affirming care or literally whatever, right? Making sure that the people that you're picking are actually going to support your kids without doing things like that, withholding care that you would have been providing for them anyway.
Yeah. That's exactly that. I mean, that's so much of why I wanted to have this conversation and have you on. And so while I'm married to a man and in a heterosexual relationship, all of my 20s, I was partnered with a woman. So, and we co-parented together. I, saw her journey, which was hard. She had to legally adopt her daughter. And you just see, like, once you experience that and you see where, this community has to continually again and again fight for just basic rights,
Basic. Yeah.
and just even like the example where it's like, okay, a heterosexual couple, if they had a sperm donor, for whatever reason, like that, there wouldn't be this amount of scrutiny and like needing to legally adopt your child, right? I'd assume not. I mean, I don't know. Have you heard that
I have honestly, I don't deal with the adoption side.
of things?
Like,
Yeah.
how does that actually work? No, they don't. Heterosexual couples, as far as I'm aware, do not have the same hurdles that same-sex couples
Yeah.
do on adopting their children, even if they're biological children, right? Like you could have an egg harvested, right? It's your biological child, and your partner is carrying that child. They give birth to them, but you're not recognized as their parent because you didn't give birth, even though it's your egg. Wild, right? And that's why it's important that we find out, like, how did your family come to be, so that we can make sure that your family stays together and that everybody stays protected.
Again, that's like also where this, conversation I think expands to, as professionals. And I know I have a lot of professionals, professional fiduciaries, estate planning attorneys that listen to this podcast. And honestly, like personally, I've been really reflecting on, how is like me and, and my fiduciary practice, how can it be, even more inclusive? I like to think that I am already, but how can I really reflect that? And also as professionals, how can we do a better job of just, taking that next step, doing that right thing?
The way that I look at that is it's really about listening and understanding, right? And affirming. A lot of us grew up with the rejection of who we are, right? So
Yeah.
it's us as professionals to acknowledge and honor who you are, right?
Mm.
And as storytellers, right? Our job is we're telling your story, right? We're making sure that, like, the things that you've worked hard for and the things that all of the things that you've done, continue to tell your story, whatever that looks like, and to whomever that is. And then being just like what you said, like, standing up for people in the community, right? Either as an ally or somebody in the community. One of the other things that I see a lot, and this is a crossover between the real estate and estate side, is owning real estate with somebody you're not married to, especially in the LGBTQ community, right? There's still a lot of people that just they're not getting married for whatever reason. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care if you're married or not, right? But owning real estate together, one, there are a whole host of things that you have to talk about before you do it, right? Like, how do you hold title, right? What you say on title may not reflect what real life is, right? Like, you and I go buy a piece of property together, right? I put in significantly more money into the purchase, but then the shift is different on the day-to-day expenses, right? On title, you and I own this thing together equally, which means when we sell it, it's an equal split of the proceeds, even though that's not what's really happened. So how do you protect yourself, right? One is
Mhm.
a written agreement that identifies who's bringing in what, who's responsible for what and when, what happens when we want to sell it, what happens if we break up, right? Your exit strategy, how do we deal with conflict, all of that stuff. And that also talks about there's an estate planning component in there too. Depending on how you own this real estate, you're either going to own it as tenants in common or joint tenants. Those are your only two options when you're unmarried.
Mm.
Tenants in common doesn't have any inheritance to the other person. So you may be in a long-standing committed relationship. You're not married.
Mm.
You and I are legal strangers to each other. You can't inherit with me. We've owned this house for 20 years together, right? We've raised these wonderful kids together. We've got this whole life. We are not married. How do you protect your long-term partner who you're not married to? The only way that you do that is through estate planning. The only way. So if you own real estate with somebody that you're not married to and you own it as tenants in common, you're intentionally disinheriting your partner, because the people who are going to inherit your share is set by law unless you do an estate plan.
I see.
Yeah.
So with that kind of scenario, is that you're reaching out to a real estate attorney that would be drawing up this agreement?
Yeah.
Do you help with that or not anymore?
Yes, but not with the Fonte law, right? But
Okay.
this is something that it's like, think of it like a prenup. It's a real estate prenup, right? Because
Hmm.
it's going to talk about, this is the money I'm bringing in. This is the money that you're bringing in. This is how we're going to deal with all of it. This is how we're going to get out of it. While y'all still like each other, because the breakups are the worst.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, right. That's
Yeah.
when we wind up in
Yeah.
court.
Yeah. And you know, back to the taking the real estate out of it, you're in a long-term relationship with somebody and you're not married. You're legal strangers. They cannot inherit from you. You get into an accident and you're in the hospital and you don't have an advanced healthcare directive or a HIPAA authorization that allows your partner to have access to you. They have no right to even be in the hospital with you.
So that's again going back to like, planning and estate
Yeah,
planning. And I'm thinking if you're a registered domestic partner, then probably having that. I mean, everyone should have an advanced healthcare directive, but it becomes that much more important, right? For that very
right.
reason. Otherwise, they're not
Yeah,
welcome in the room.
they're not, they have no authority to talk to the doctors about your care. They have no authority to make decisions about your care, right? And, you know, use the example of you've got, you know, estranged parents who
Hmm.
do not support you, do not support your partner, right? And they find out that you're in an accident and they're your next of kin.
Yeah.
What if you don't want that person there, right? That's why you have to do these types of plans to make sure that the people that you want to take care of you can take care of you. And it sucks because nobody wants to talk about this stuff. Nobody wants to talk about dying. Nobody wants to talk about not being able to make the decisions on their own. We're all going to live forever, right? Who
Yeah.
would love that? But that's not the life we live in.
I think that's where the denial of death, it like I think it's really built into the brain, right? We all like we all have that, even professionals. I mean, that's
Hmm.
been something I've been really reflecting on and looking on, within my own, just my own network where, and I know Patricia actually speaks to this a lot of, do you have a succession plan?
Yeah,
What do you have in place? And you'd be amazed at how many people don't. And I think it's, again, it goes back to the denial of death. We all
yeah,
so much have it, right? So much.
right. It's the denial of death and also just life. Everybody's busy. We all have stuff. It's on everybody's list at the bottom, and it remains at the bottom until something happens. Right? It's like there's usually a catalyst event, which is like one of my favorite phrases, especially being a lesbian. The catalyst event. The catalyst event in estate planning is usually something bad happens, right? You have
Yeah.
a parent, you have a parent that passes and they don't have their plan in place, and you and your siblings are fighting, or it's just a giant mess, right? And it could have been so much easier, right? Or
Or incapacity.
somebody loses capacity, right? Somebody gets into an accident and they're in a coma, and now you can't have access, or the money is locked up, right? Because there's no power of attorney. There's only one person on the account. And what happens if you don't have those plans in place? You're in court, and you're not in court because you're incapacitated. Your friends and family are in court fighting over all this stuff, and it's time consuming and it's expensive and it's public. Nobody's business.
That privacy piece was like really, I really took a lot away from that. Like I hadn't quite thought that through. And you guys are so right. So I love that as a practice. You're not putting your children's name in documents, and then having like basically an addendum to the estate plan. It sits alongside, right? Your estate
It
planning
sits right
documents.
alongside it. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
standalone document, and it supports the guardianship, supports other provisions inside your plan, but it's a standalone document all by
I love
itself.
that. Well, and
Yeah.
also it reminds me of like, like a letter of intent. I really I appreciate those documents. So, but specifically for the guardianship, it's wonderful.
Yeah. And one of the other things about guardianships is, we talked about a lot about the kids, is that it also identifies short-term guardians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something happens to you, even like on just a short-term basis, like the kids are at school or in daycare, wherever they are, the
Mm-hmm.
babysitter, right? If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have something in place for someone to take temporary guardianship of them, guess where they go?
Mm.
They're going to foster care, because the police are going to say, hey, they're in the hospital. Your 16-year-old babysitter can't keep them. We're going to take in the best interest of the child may not be where you want them, which is foster care, right? Or with a family member that you don't want to have them.
Yeah.
So we have short and long-term guardians. So the folks that are going to take interim care of the kid until the permanent guardian is in place, or if the permanent guardian needs to be in place.
I would love, I don't know if you have like a client success story that you can share.
How about a client empowerment story?
Yeah.
Okay, this is my favorite one, and this goes back to healthcare. If I am ever pregnant again, it is not because of my own choice. Okay. So, and we can be real clear about that in your advanced healthcare directive. We have for our clients who are capable of becoming pregnant, we have language in there that deals with healthcare related decisions when I'm pregnant. Okay. And you can get real creative with that. If you're good with pregnancy, right? We can talk about if I'm this far along, you can do this type of treatment. If I'm this far along, I want you to do this, right? Client empowerment also involves people who are childless by choice. In the LGBTQ community, there are plenty of people who choose to be childless, right? So we have language in it that says, and we can be as soft or as hard as you want on it. If I am pregnant, it is not by choice, and it direct authorization to your healthcare agent to seek abortion care. We're fortunate to live in a state where we still respect person's choice to choose on how they want to take care of their body. And it's a decision made between the patient and the practitioner, right? Not so
Yeah.
fortunate elsewhere. That I think would probably be one of my favorite empowerment stories, working with a lesbian couple, and they were adamant about having language in their advanced healthcare directive that says you have to seek abortion care because under no circumstances do I want to have a child. And I can't think of a more empowering thing for a person to do is to have that type of conviction and the ability to say it and have an
Yeah.
agent who will stand by it. When we're talking to you about who are the people that are going to stand up to the doctors and say, absolutely not, that's not what they want, right? It's stuff like that. It's not just pulling the plug. It's making healthcare decisions like reproductive healthcare choices. Like if I'm pregnant, I do not want to be, or if I'm pregnant, and I'm before these many weeks, you can get very, very specific about what type of medical care you want. And I use pregnancy as an example only because it's a lived experience for me.
Yeah.
And the language that came into that advanced healthcare directive is something that I created 10 years ago when I had a daughter, and I was thinking about that, right? And I remember getting a phone call from both of my parents, and they're like, what the hell is this? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, why did you send this to me? And I was like, well, because I'm going to be going under major surgery. And if something happens to me, yes, my now ex-husband is going to be the one to make it, but you both are backups and you need to know, right? So having specific language about, and whether it's pregnancy related or any other type of medical care for our trans friends, right? It's making sure that they are receiving gender affirming care, whatever their gender is, right? That they're receiving gender affirming care and they're not being discriminated against because of it, right? And tying that into the pregnancy related, for trans men, if they haven't had surgery to remove their female reproductive organs, they have the ability to become pregnant. That's why I say people who have the ability to become pregnant, not women, people, right? So it's just, we can be very custom in how we draft your documents. I know it's not just a bunch of piece of paper. It feels like it's just a bunch of piece of paper, but it's not. We can be very, very, very intentional with how we draft things, especially when it comes to healthcare for our community.
I applaud you and thank you for pulling out that example. Advocacy is so much of this work. So
Yeah.
much of this work. And it's also a lot of what lights me up about this work. I considered of going to law school and I didn't. So I guess with that piece, like with the advocating for clients, whether they fit into the LGBTQ plus community or not, it's honestly with a living client, it's a part of the work. It's
Yeah.
just, it has to be. And especially, I think, in this day and age, I mean, our healthcare system, there's all of these systems are really failing. I mean, I feel like we're really seeing it loud and clear. And
Yeah.
so, what is that required? It's required, whether you're a professional or just, a family member or, an entrusted person that's carrying out someone's final wishes. This advocacy piece is just, I think, so crucial to have and just know going in when you're carrying that responsibility.
And a plug to the professional fiduciaries, because, we've talked about the family and then the chosen family, right? A lot of times people in our community don't have the people. right? They don't have family members that they can rely on to serve in these trusted roles, right? And also their chosen family, maybe they don't have their chosen family is their chosen family because we love them. But we can love all sorts of people, but they're not the right people to serve in these types of roles. And that's where a lot of times, like we have these
Mm,
conversations with clients every once in a while. They're like, I don't have anybody that I trust to do any of this.
yeah.
Nobody,
Yeah.
right? And whether they're
Yeah.
in the community or out of the community, like the role of a private professional fiduciary is crucial because you support a huge part of our community for people who don't have the people to do the things that they need to be done, whether they're alive or after they've died, right? Like
Oh, so much. Yeah.
you're filling a huge role and a huge gap of where, so like in speaking to our community, if you have concerns because you don't have family that would be able to do these types of things, or you don't have friends that you think can do these things, there are people who can and will do these things, and they're licensed in the state of California to do it,
Yeah. Isn't that
right?
amazing? I know.
Like,
We live in one of
yeah.
the few
So
states.
if that's a barrier to entry, because if you're thinking about estate planning and you're like, I don't know who would do any of this stuff for me, like it's a conversation that we would have with someone like you, Sarah, to
Mhm.
say, this is what they have, this is what they're concerned about, these are the things that they would need. You're not alone. You're not alone in making sure that you remain protected. You don't fall into the people's hands that you don't want falling into, right? And somebody is going to carry out the wishes that you want. There is somebody, if you don't have anybody in the two buckets that we've been talking about, the family and your family,
Yeah.
right? There is another option, and that's people just like Sarah, right?
I mean, I do think, I mean, obviously I'm always going to have a bias because this is the work I do, but I think that is one of the greatest gifts, and where partnering with a professional fiduciary can provide just such peace and relief for families because we're really, I'm just a neutral party. Like, I don't care
Right.
what you want. Just tell me what you want and I'll execute that, right? I'll advocate and fight for you and,
Yeah.
but that's up to you and not, and I've definitely seen that even just, from personal stories, not just professional stories where, family members get involved and then everyone has an opinion and they're not really going by, what the documents say. And,
Yeah.
that's very different. So I think that the times that we're living in, I'm like, family systems are changing, right? Whether you're LGBTQ plus community, whether you're divorced, remarried, maybe divorced, remarried, kids, blended families,
Yeah.
or maybe you're not married at all. How we're creating family is looking different. I had a phone call with someone recently, and he was just telling me, the more that I do personal work on myself, the more that I'm like reparenting myself and
Yep.
cutting ties from my family. And I'm realizing that I don't want to leave anything to my family. I want to leave everything to basically give it back to the earth and leave it for the land. And that's really his legacy is like giving back and hopefully leaving the world a better place and protecting land. And so, it's just amazing where we can come to this conversation from so many different angles. But I
Yeah.
really like I love, of course I loved you. I didn't question that at all, just knowing that you're partnered now with Patricia and Patricia's just absolutely wonderful and bringing this level of heart and also just like the practical piece, right? How we can tease this out. If you're working, and this is where I'll just say as a professional fiduciary, if you're working with an estate planning attorney that you feel like you can't ask stupid questions or you feel like they're phoning it in and you're intimidated by, there are wonderful, wonderful estate planning attorneys like Becca, like Patricia, find that right person for you. I think the more that we can feel like we should be at the center of this planning. It should be built on us and it should be unique to us. It shouldn't just be, just checking it off the box of things to do and just like a template estate
That's
plan.
100% accurate. Yeah. You should have FaceTime with your lawyer. They should be asking you, when I told you, like, we get in your business, we get in your business. I
Yeah.
want to know. Tell me the dirty secrets about your family, because if you've got a brother that's putting it all up his nose, you want
Yeah.
best believe that we are not putting him in charge of the money or the kid,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? We are going to put the fences around you and around your kids and around your money to make sure that those types of things don't happen. But also, like we're looking at the bad side stuff, but also when we're talking about like getting in your business and finding out who your people are, we're also looking for opportunities to be generous.
Mm.
How else
Mhm.
can we provide and support and give, right? And
Mhm.
whether that's to family or whether that's to charity, like whatever lights you up, whoever you want to support, like we're there to help make sure that that happens and that those people are good stewards of your money. It's a lot of fun.
Becca, thank you for coming on and having this conversation with me. I've taken away a lot. I know listeners will too. We will link all the links that you provided of where to find you, where to stay connected.
Yeah.
Are there any parting words that you want to leave us with?
Well, happy Pride. This is being aired in Pride Month, June 2025, right? So
Yes,
happy
yes.
Pride. Be gay, be loud. Get your estate plan done if you haven't. If you're not in California and you're listening to this, reach out to Sarah. She can help connect you with us and we can help you find an attorney in your state that, you know, leads with their heart too when they're doing estate planning. This is not just everybody in this country needs an estate plan.
Yes,
Everybody. So
yes.
it's not just California specific, but be gay, be loud, go have fun, live your life.
I love that. Yay. Thank you,
Yeah.
Becca.
Thank you.